are now listening to the War Report Podcast Network.
SEC, welcome to the Red River Rivalry. No doubt it is one of the greatest rivalries in all of college football, but is it the best? Let's talk about it here on the Sooner Spotlight. Sooner fans, Sooner Nation, welcome into another episode of the Sooner Spotlight. Very excited to be able to talk about one of the greatest, if not the greatest, rivalry in all of college football. And for the first time, an SEC matchup between the Oklahoma Sooners and the Texas Longhorns. This week, it's going to be the 18th ranked Oklahoma Sooners going against the number 1 ranked Texas Longhorns. This means a lot for Texas fans, being number 1 and being able to pride themselves on ranking themselves at number 1 and having an outstanding season so far. And for Oklahoma, kind of feels like you're playing with a little bit of house money here. You've got nothing to lose. We're not going to talk about too much of the matchup today for this week, but we are going to dive into the history and talk a little bit more. First, want to remind everybody, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Those are 2 ways to help this podcast grow tremendously, and it helps out more than you know. So just hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and comment down below. Comment who's going to cover the spread. Right now it's sitting at a 14.5 point spread as I'm looking at it. Who's going to cover the spread? Texas is favored by 14.5 points. So is Texas going to win by more than 14 points or less than 14 points? Or I guess less than 15. So that's kind of what it is right now. So comment that down below. I want to hear what you think. Or do you think the Red River Rivalry is the greatest rivalry in all of college football? I want to hear your thoughts. So please drop that down in the comments down below. But let's get into it. Let's talk about the history, the pageantry, everything going on around the Red River Rivalry. I'm going to call it the Red River Rivalry. I know a lot of you like the Red River Shootout. Pretty much nobody likes the Red River Showdown. That's not even a part of the question. But Red River Rivalry, it's a little hard for some of our friends, maybe over in Louisiana, to say. So we just kind of like to throw that one out there just to give you a tongue twister. But all jokes aside, this rivalry and the history behind it, how amazing this rivalry is, it dates all the way back to October 10th, the second Saturday in October, all the way back to 1900. That's how long this rivalry has been around. So Oklahoma and Texas fans know this mutual feeling of hatred between each other. We understand this rivalry, one of the oldest rivalries in all of college football. So this being a very old rivalry, Texas actually took the first 4 games in this rivalry, followed by a tie, and then Texas taking a few more after that. So they actually started on a very hot note in the beginning of this rivalry. So, looking at where this rivalry began, and I'm going to get tired of saying that word if I don't quit it, but when this matchup began, when this became a rivalry, Texas really owned it, and they started off really strong, really coming out of the gates really heavy, beating Oklahoma most of the time until we got to World War II, and since then, it's really been Oklahoma. We'll talk about the record here in just a moment, but getting into the Golden Hat, that's the Golden Hat, one of the most, prestigious, one of the most well-known trophies in all of college football when it comes down to rivalries. The Golden Hat is one of, I think, the coolest, and I know I'm biased by saying that, but I think I've heard that from a lot of other college football fans as well, that they believe that, man, that is a pretty cool trophy, and it's hard to deny how cool of a trophy the Golden Hat is. Not just a trophy that you can hold up, one that you can take a picture with, but one that you can put on and you can actually wear the trophy. That's something that's very well known, something that we see a lot. So, it definitely is one of the coolest trophies. But this Golden Hat was created back in 1941 to give some sort of trophy for these schools to fight for in this game. And it was known as the bronze hat or even the brass hat back in the day because it was kind of duller. It looked more bronze, more brass than golden. So they called it the brass hat, the bronze hat, until right around the 1970s it got reworked and it came out a lot more golden, as you can see on the graphic on the screen. Much more golden now, and you can even see that whenever the players are tossing it around to each other and putting it on their heads and celebrating the win. And it's definitely, yeah, I mean, I don't know any other trophies that are quite as cool as this one when it comes to rivalry trophies. So definitely one that you've got to look at if you don't know much about this golden hat, what it is and what it looks like, how it's used whenever players win the golden hat. Definitely go check that out. I'm sure you can find many pictures, videos, things of that nature. Another part about this rivalry that makes it so special is being played in the Cotton Bowl. Many fans forget that this is not just a rivalry game where it's played on one's field or the other, but it's actually played in Dallas at the Cotton Bowl, almost directly middle between Norman and Austin. So it's a very much the most neutral site as you can possibly get, split 50-50, perfectly down the middle, half Oklahoma Sooners, half Texas Longhorns, so half crimson, half burnt orange, perfectly down the 50-yard line. And if you've never been there to see it, it is a crazy sight to see. And if you just looking at a picture, you can see how crazy that is from a bird's eye view, but being able to see that in person, even crazier, and something that everyone, if you're a college football fan, should want to experience at some point in their lifetime, just because this is not just some normal football game. And that's kind of what I'm explaining to you guys because of how special this Red River rivalry truly is. But the contract was signed. There was a contract signed in 2014 that would have this game played at the Cotton Bowl through 2025, so that would be through next season. And now here, just last year in December in 2023, it was announced that this stadium would have some renovations done to it, and that the contract would be extended all the way through 2036. So the Red River Rivalry at the Texas State Fair, in the Cotton Bowl, and with everything going on around it, it's going to be happening all the way through 2036. We've got another 12 years of this. So I guess 11 more seasons, just something like that. I guess 12 more games. So it looks like an amazing future for this rivalry as we get to keep on going down to the great stadium of the Cotton Bowl, a historic stadium. And the stadium has so much history of itself, but then, you go on top of that. Personally, I love old stadiums. I think there's certain stadiums where, it's nice. I think Oklahoma is one of those where you look at it and it's an older stadium, but they've done so many renovations where it doesn't look old anymore. I think Ohio State is one that they've done renovations to, but they keep that old feeling to, one of those fun stadiums. The Cotton Bowl, one of those as well, where they've done some, they really haven't done a whole lot to the Cotton Bowl. They've pretty much just let it sit there, maintain it, and keep it to how it is. And it's one of those historic stadiums that, I'm excited to see what the renovations might be, but I do like the historic look to this stadium. Maybe the Coliseum might be another one that you might be able to compare it to. Maybe not quite to that magnitude, not what I'm saying, but definitely a very historic stadium, even when you just dive into it and look at it. But like I said, split down the 50-yard line, that is something that is unseen in any college football game anywhere around the nation. It doesn't matter what rivalry game it is. It doesn't matter what bowl game it is. None of that matters. You never see a stadium truly split half and half with the fans. This is a true neutral site. There is no such thing as home field advantage, I guess, other than depending on which side of the field you're currently on as an offense or defense, I suppose. So with the way this is, it used to alternate. I believe back in 2007, I might have my dates mixed up on that, but I believe back in 2007, they offered for the fans to kind of swap sides. And so down in the south end zone where that tunnel is used to be reserved for whoever the home team was, and they would swap sides back and forth depending on who the home team was. But Texas actually didn't decline that. I think right around 2014, something like that, where they declined swapping sides anymore. And since then, I believe Oklahoma's been down in that south end zone where the tunnel is. So you can just imagine another aspect of this rivalry and this game itself is that you have Texas running out of the tunnel down there in the south end zone and hearing boos. And then by the time they get closer to 50-yard line and cross that 50-yard line, they can hear their own fans screaming and cheering them on as they run out of the tunnel. And for Oklahoma, the opposite. If you start off and you're running from the tunnel over to the 50, past the 50-yard line, then you're going to hear cheering and leading into boos as you get to the other side. So it's just an amazing atmosphere when you dive into that and think about what the players are feeling when they run out of the tunnel, going down to just such a minor aspect like that in the game. Or you might be driving down the field and you've got a quiet field and you're starting in your own territory, and as you drive down further down the field, you're driving towards the enemy's territory where their fans are at, and it becomes an away game all of a sudden. And it's kind of crazy how loud that can get in just one half of the stadium. And I don't know if it's the design of the stadium, or maybe it's just I suppose it's got to be the passion of the fans, but still a very loud atmosphere when you're down on that half of the field where the opposing team's fans are screaming at you. So piecing all of this together, I just don't know many atmospheres that are quite like this one. Let's dive into the game a little bit more. So since 2000, let's back up, because I think really you get into the 1900s and we can go further back, but like I said, since World War II, Oklahoma has owned the series. Ultimately, Oklahoma has had more wins than Texas since World War II. And of course, the one that Texas likes to throw out is the fact that they lead 63 to 51 in 5 ties. So they've got the lead there just by a little bit, by that 12 games, but they leave out the fact that since World War II, in modern era, they really haven't led this series. And so that's where you look at it, and it is much closer than I think Texas fans might be willing to admit, and us Oklahoma fans love to bring that up, right? But since 2000, and that's what the reason why I go back to 2000 is just because I think that's what's most relevant in modern times of college football, and really even back to 2000, we got to think that's 24 years ago. So that's quite a ways back. But even in my lifetime, just looking at where Texas has been. Going back to 2000, though, Oklahoma leads this series 17-8. 17 wins to 8 losses. That's something that Texas fans don't like to admit. They don't like to reflect on that. They really just like to look back at just a couple of seasons ago when Dillon Gabriel was out, and it seemed like Jeff Lebby didn't want to throw the ball with either Davis Bevel or put Nick Evers in the game to try to have him run the ball. And instead, we ran the same wildcat formation over and over and over again until it didn't work anymore and kept on running it anyways. They want to bring that game up where Texas ended up beating Oklahoma 49-0 rather than looking back to 2000 and seeing where Oklahoma's really owned this series. Even if you go back to just 2010, which I think is way more relevant than jumping back 24 years ago, just jumping back 14 years ago and starting then, you've had Oklahoma, Texas meet each other 15 times since then, because there was that Big 12 championship game that they met in. So since 2010, Oklahoma has led this series 11-4. So something that I think is thrown out there, I think Texas fans really just like to say that they own the series because they have the greater win total on the entire series, dating all the way back to 1900 when it first started. But Oklahoma fans like to remind Texas fans that, hey, we've thrown those horns down just a few more times than you've been able to throw them up since 2000 and since 2010, and even dating back to the last few times that we've gone against each other. Just remember who actually owns this rivalry as of recent times. And I only throw that out there just because it is a little bit fun to jab at your rival, correct? And I think just about anyone would probably agree. And Texas fans like to dish it back. That's why we can take it as long as you can take it. We'll go back and forth. But going on, we've got Texas being a double-digit favorite going into this game. Like I said, right now, 14.5 points. They're expected to win by a couple of touchdowns, if not more. Many people picking Texas to win in a blowout and by a wide margin. But I want to throw this out there, and this is because Oklahoma's actually been on the opposite side, the wrong side of this, the bad side, I suppose you would say, not necessarily bad, but throw this out there because Oklahoma's been the favorite more often than not since 2000. The Sooners have been favorites, double-digit favorites 7 times since 2000, and Texas has only been a double-digit favorite 2 times since 2000 in this century. So Oklahoma has been a favorite more often, but the favorite in this matchup in the last 8 times the favorite has only gone 2-6 against the spread. So even though you're favored by double digits in this rivalry game, there's only been a team that has covered 2 times, once for the Oklahoma Sooners and once for Texas in all of those. And of course, Oklahoma being on the other side where they're not able to cover the spread. And in fact, there's 2 times where that double-digit favorite ends up losing. And both of those times, 2013 and 2017, if memory serves me correctly, where the Texas Longhorns actually beat the Oklahoma Sooners as a double-digit, the Oklahoma Sooners were a double-digit favorite and ended up losing and getting upset in that game. So I throw this out just to say that this rivalry, when you dive into the game, even though Texas is heavily favored, just remember, history does like to repeat itself, especially in these kinds of series, and especially in a rivalry game where things definitely get chaotic. In a rivalry game with this one, where you have to remember a lot of players come out of Texas. A lot of college football D1 players come out of the state of Texas. So you've got a lot of these players who have actually played with or against each other in many different scenarios, whether they're playing against each other in high school, with each other in high school, maybe they're playing against each other or with each other in different tournaments. There's a lot of history between these 2 groups of players as well. So that's something that's kind of unusual, where maybe you jump over to maybe Ohio State, Michigan, and compare to that rivalry where those players, some of them might have had some sort of history with each other, but for the most part, not really. Not a lot of players really come from Ohio and Michigan compared to Oklahoma and Texas. And where there's a ton of Texas players on both rosters. Texas high school players get drafted or get recruited a lot more than maybe Michigan or Ohio State or from the state of Ohio, and really just about anywhere. I think California, Texas, maybe a little bit in Arizona. You get Florida players or another big place to go and get players, but ultimately I think that Texas, the brand of football that Texas high school football gives you, there's a lot of young players that come out of Texas. And so that's just something a little bit extra to add to this rivalry and what you see with these players, because they do know each other. They do have a deep rivalry that dates back to more than just their collegiate career. Just some things to throw out there to show how amazing this game is. Now, to answer the question that I asked towards the beginning of this, is this the best rivalry in college football? Now, I think you would be delusional to say that the Red River Rivalry is not one of the greatest. I think you have to mark it top 3, top 5 at the very least, depending on who you are, because it's all based on opinion, right? It really is no facts to back it up to say this is the greatest rivalry because of this fact. Now, all of the facts that I give you in the history, I think that the history does build up a rivalry. I think it helps a rivalry when there's a lot of history behind it, but it doesn't necessarily say anything about how you would rank a rivalry, not entirely. So you look at other rivalries. I think the only rivalry that I would really put up there, I think 2 that people would throw out the most, is the big game between Michigan, Ohio State, like I mentioned, and the Iron Bowl between Auburn, Alabama. Now, personally, I have been around the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry, and I don't think that rivalry, to me, seems as strong as the Alabama-Auburn, that Iron Bowl, or even the Red River rivalry itself. So, personally, I put that one in 3rd, and when I'm talking about these top 3, and I know there's others. You've got Georgia, Florida, and again, I don't think that's as much of one. That's probably as much of a rivalry as Oklahoma State was, maybe not even that much. Personally, I think Bedlam might even be more than that. And I know I'm probably stepping on a lot of people's toes by throwing these opinions out there, but that's okay. This is why I come onto a camera to express my opinions, and it doesn't really matter whether you agree with them or not. You can jump in the comments below and roast me all you want. I will take it, and I'm good at taking it. But I would compare Oklahoma, Texas, the Red River rivalry, to the Iron Bowl when I'm ranking my top rivalries. And really, it's hard for me to say that one is better than the other because of my bias. Sure, you can throw that in there, but I ultimately do say that the rivalry itself, and what I mean by the rivalry, I mean between the players and between the fans, I would have to maybe give the edge over to the Iron Bowl. I think the fans living in the same state, and you're really kind of divided. Whether if you live on this side, you're wearing blue and orange, and if you're on this side, you're wearing crimson. So it's a very deep-seated rivalry with the fans, and I think that's a lot different because you're constantly living around each other day after day, and you're right there next to each other. There is something heated in that rivalry that is unmatched, I think. Now, that's nothing to take away from the rivalry between Oklahoma and Texas, because I think we hate each other very similarly, and we have that hatred towards each fan base. But I don't know if I'm ready to say that it's stronger or better than the Iron Bowl rivalry itself. But where I do stand, so I would say the rivalry goes to the Iron Bowl, but the game itself and everything surrounding the game, with all of the history, dividing it where you've got half of the stadium literally divided down the center to where you can see a direct line on the 50-yard line of half crimson, half burnt orange. You get this golden hat trophy, which I think is far better than any other rivalry trophy. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's the greatest rivalry trophy in college football. Everything going into this game. And then on top of that, something that I don't think I ever really mentioned in depth is the fact that it's in the middle of the Texas State Fair, where you can go out at halftime and go get yourself a funnel cake, a corn dog, and come right back into the game and finish the second half. That is the pageantry. That is the extracurriculars into this game itself, to where I think this rivalry game itself and everything that goes into it is unmatched. There is no rivalry game like the Red River Rivalry. On top of that, you also have the ROTCs who, towards the beginning of the week, I believe it is, that they both take a game ball from Norman and from Austin and run that game ball all the way to Dallas and meet in the middle. Just so many amazing things in the history and the pageantry of this game itself that is unmatched. And I don't think even the rivalry of the Iron Bowl can compete against the Red River Rivalry in the game itself and everything that goes into the game. All of these things that I've already mentioned. I'm not going to repeat everything that I've already gone through. So the history, the pageantry, the record of this rivalry, and how it can swing back and forth, even the game itself, and how it's played, and how vastly difficult it is, even when Texas is a 14-point favorite, for people just to say that Texas is going to win this game. That's what makes this rivalry game itself far better than any other rivalry game, in my opinion. I know I'm biased. I know that I've got a dog in this fight. But again, I say that the best rivalry, when you talk about the hatred between two fan bases and between two teams, I would give that to Alabama, Auburn, and everything, because even though the record leans so heavily in Alabama's favor, that rivalry still stays true, and that rivalry is still close every game or every year because of the hatred between these two teams and their fan bases. Whereas Texas, Oklahoma, I think we also share a very similar hatred that the Iron Bowl shares, but the game itself, unmatched. So I do kind of make a little bit of a separation between the two, where I would say Iron Bowl number one and maybe number 1A, and the Red River Rivalry, mark it down as an asterisk, and maybe put that as 1B, something like that, where you kind of separate them, but they're still the same. In my opinion, that's just because of the game itself, the history, everything that goes into the Red River Rivalry. Hey Sooner fans, did you enjoy this video? Well, go ahead and hit that like button and go ahead and hit that subscribe button. What are you doing if you've made it this far and haven't already? You should be able to find that subscribe button over here. And then if you want to see full episodes, we've got those up here, and clips right down here. So go check that out. But we thank you all so much for all the love, all the support. We'll catch you next time. Boomer.